In this video, I'll be assuming two things. One, that Monster Hunter World was your first Monster Hunter, or you're just not completely familiar with everything that Generations and now Generations Ultimate will offer. And two, that you're probably well versed in the weapon that I'll be discussing, so this won't be a full-on guide, but rather a quick summary on the differences between the weapons in the two games.
What's the difference?
Hey guys, what's up? Right now I'm going to talk about the Greatsword. Now the Greatsword in World is probably the Blade Master weapon that has changed the most, coming from previous games. The playstyle is different, but the principle of the weapon is still the same, finding or creating openings for you to get off your strongest attacks. First I want to talk about the new changes that Greatsword got in World, because if it wasn't for these changes, the weapon would still pretty much play the same as it did in previous games, but these additions were so impactful that they completely revolutionized how to play the weapon. The first is the shoulder tackle. Now I definitely thought it was cool when I saw it, giving the Greatsword a counter definitely would open up its windows of opportunity, but overall I thought it would be a minor change.
Wrong-o.
The counter functionality was great, but what really changed the weapon is the fact that we could use the shoulder bash as a shortcut to get to different levels of charges. The tackle alone ended up being game-changing for the Greatsword, as it allowed us to skip to the strong charge, or the other new addition to Greatsword, the true charge slash. Now the weapon already had its regular charge and the strong charge, but World gave us a new attack that we could do after the strong charge, which is even more powerful. The true charge slash ended up being so strong that it completely changed the way we play the Greatsword, and it made it so that we want to focus on how many of these we can get off in a fight. These two additions melded nicely with the weapon, as the counter let the Greatsword players be a bit more proactive, giving us the chance to create our own openings for our attacks instead of waiting and needing to position all the time. Positioning is still key in a Greatsword hunt, but now we can be a bit more open-minded in how we fight different monsters. The old hit-and-run style of the weapon is still possible in World with using crit draw and quick sheath, but again, the damage of TSEs is just too much to ignore. Overall, I thought the changes were really cool, and it breathed some new life into a very old-school weapon. But what about in Gen Ultimate? Well, as I mentioned before, we want to make or create openings to get off our charge attacks. And the way a Greatsword fight plays out in Gen Ultimate will depend heavily on which style we're using. So let's start off with those. First off is Guild style. This will be the classic Greatsword style that we've known, just with the added bonus of having two Hunter arts. It's important to note that this style will be the only one with the unchanged moveset that'll let us strong charge. Next up is Striker. Striker style can't strong charge, and we only have the first charge, which makes this style popular for the previously mentioned hit and run style. It's this style that I'll usually run with crit draw, as the draw attacks will be the main focus of the playstyle. Striker having the option to bring 3 Hunter Arts will give it a bit more options as well. Aerial Greatsword might seem a bit tempting to a lot of players coming from World, as we know that the aerial attacks of Greatsword in World are very strong. But I have to say that that's just World really wanting to buff up the motion values of jump attacks for whatever reason. While the playstyle will be pretty much similar, it will not do nearly as much damage as jump attacks in World. Aerial Greatsword can't even charge on the ground, as your draw attack will just be another jump attack. So this aerial charge you're seeing here is the only thing that the style can do. That being said, it's still pretty entertaining, and decently good at getting mountain monsters. Now these next two I'll talk about hand in hand, Brave and Adept. The interesting thing about these two styles is that they really changed up the options for Greatsword, with Adept being reactive and Brave being proactive. Adept was already in Generations, but it was pretty weak and received a significant buff going into Gen Ultimate. After getting an Adept dodge, Adept will let you do a charged upswing attack towards the monster, which you can follow up by a really quickly charged strong charge. It's a relatively safe style which can still put out good damage, but you do have to take into account the distance and positioning when you're running around and doing your attacks. It can be pretty easy to whiff if you haven't practiced enough. The other is Brave. Once you're in Brave mode, you gain the ability to draw into a strong charge, which not only looks badass, but is very strong. Your draw attacks will be very quick, and you'll have a dash option when you do your regular charge for repositioning. You can either play around Brave dodging into a quick draw attack, or just look for your own openings. You don't have to depend on the Brave dodges, which again makes Brave a little bit more proactive than Adept. If you really like the reactive and opportunistic playstyle of Greatsword in World, then I think you'll really like either Adept or Brave. And last but not least is Alchemy.
Do a barrel roll!
Which again is Striker 2.0 with a run and draw playstyle and SP support for you and your team. Lastly, let's talk about the Hunter arts. First off is Lion's Maw. Aside from looking very stylish, it powers up your next attack significantly. This hunter art is very popular with striker style as it works very nicely with the hit and run playstyle. I'm gonna say this right now, Lion's Maw is pretty much the only solid hunter art for Greatsword. Ground Slash is pretty meh. It does okay damage, but it's kinda awkward to fit into a hunt, and it also disrupts your teammates, so it's not really worth taking. Brimstone Slash is pretty good, but it's very situational. You basically do a really long charge where you take in any damage that you take and add it to your swing. It can do a lot of damage, but it's pretty situational and you probably need some kind of setup to really execute it in a hunt. And last is the one that got added in Gen Ultimate, which is Moonbreaker. It does okay damage and it's pretty cool looking, but it's not used that much. When it comes to choosing your playstyle, you're really going to have to consider what kind of approach you want in the hunt itself. Guild and Striker will let you play the truly old classic style. But the selling points for Guild and Striker is that you can take more arts. And as I just mentioned, Lion's Maw is really the only one you'll be taking often. Because of this, the one hunter art styles, such as Brave and Adept, are very much viable as you can just take Readiness, never lose Sharpness, and put out very good damage. But overall, Greatsword has a lot of options. In both Gen Ultimate and World, Greatsword is still the slow but high damage dealing weapon, where your timing and positioning will be key. There are several changes you'll have to get used to, but nothing that'll feel too disruptive. I will say that Gen Ultimate Greatsword will feel a lot less forgiving than how they do in World. We won't have things such as the mantles to kinda help us through certain fights. And I feel like in the older games, we have to be a lot more precise with where we're hitting. Sometimes in World, I feel like I can kinda hit wherever with the Greatsword and I still do a lot of damage. But all in all, the weapon is still a powerhouse in both games, and if you're a Greatsword main in World, then I think you're still gonna really like it in Gen Ultimate. Hopefully this helped you see some of the differences and kinda give you an idea of what to expect and what to look for when you give it a try in Gen Ultimate. Thanks for watching, and happy hunting.